Why did the city allow another fast food place? Why doesn't the city put in a gym or a Costco? Unfortunately, this isn't SimCity. In real-life economic development, the city has to reface the realities and constraints of the world and the market, not to mention competition from cities within the same region. Today, I am unpacking the often misunderstood world of economic development and how our city is getting in the game. Plus, I answer viewer questions. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get to it.
This is the Calimesa Insider Podcast, the original Pass Area City podcast, focusing on the ins and outs of your city government at work. And now here's the host of Calimesa Insider, City Manager Will Kolbow.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Calimesa Insiders. Glad to have you with us this time around. Today, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are going to dive into a topic that a lot of people are interested in, have a lot of opinions about, but few seem to truly understand, and that's economic development. And don't worry, this is actually a specialized field that even people that work in government don't really totally grasp. I'm even continually learning about how it works and how we do it effectively in our city. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk about a few other things. First, our next City Council meeting is this Monday, October 20th at 6 p.m. at the Norton Young Love Senior Center. You can attend live or in person. You can watch live or on demand on the city's YouTube page by visiting calimesa.gov/YouTube and going to the live tab. The full agenda and all backup documentation can also be found by going to calimesa.gov and clicking on agendas and minutes. And that's the case for all of our agendas. On the agenda, the council will be discussing a request for proposals, or RFP, for the installation of a video surveillance system at Summerlin Park. And this will be used to determine whether the council, first of all, would like to proceed with releasing the RFP, and if they do, review the draft RFP that staff has crafted for council's consideration, and if they want to give any feedback or additional parameters, they can do so. There is another item on closed session. Hopefully I'll have more news on that soon that I'll be able to share with you. I also, before we get to our main topic, wanted to address some comments we have received in the podcast's direct messages that I just realized were there this week. So I do apologize for not responding to some of those summaries. Some of them I received a few weeks ago. So I do really want to apologize, and I'm going to try to do a better job of keeping an eye on those messages. First, I want to say I really appreciate residents reaching out and expressing concern for our city. When someone takes the time to ask questions like these, it shows they care about the safety and quality of life in our city. And these are legitimate concerns, and they deserve thoughtful answers. So the first one is any plans to repave Calimesa Boulevard. Calimesa Boulevard has been one of the streets that has been identified as being in need of rehab. However, it is in a long list of streets. It's something that I fully acknowledge that our road system and the quality of it is not where I'd like it to be. It's not where the council would like it to be. But road funding is, I've talked about that before. If you're a regular listener on the podcast, you understand some of the challenges that we have when it comes to funding, and road projects are pretty expensive. So during each of our pavement management cycles over the past couple of years, which we've used ARPA money to supplement, staff presents a list of streets that are in most need of rehab, and then the city council ultimately decides which streets to pave. And the council, the last couple of rounds, has prioritized neighborhood streets rather than arterials, such as Calimesa Boulevard. So one factor of that is cost. Repaving Calimesa Boulevard would have eaten an entire year's worth of budget for the rehab that we've done the last couple of years. And so since it is an arterial, it's more expensive per mile because it has to support more wear and tear than residential streets, and it's much wider than a residential street, so it just requires more material and more labor. Just to give you an idea, to do the stretch from County Line Road to Sandalwood would likely exceed $2 million. I don't know the exact number these days, but I know it would exceed $2 million at this point. The city does get about $600,000 a year from Measure A, and SB1 gas taxes combined, which is typically what cities use primarily for their pavement management programs. And it's typically not economical to do a pavement management project for less than $1 million because of administrative and overhead costs. So we usually need to cobble together 2 years worth of funds for one round, unless it's supplemented by general fund dollars. And that can be done. It's just a matter of policy decision that has to be made and determine what trade-offs would be made, since the general fund has the most discretion for the council's use, and it's used for most of our operations. But also, the last couple of years, we did have that ARPA money, and that is what really allowed us to do robust projects over the last 2 years. And we've done several, I think close to 10 miles worth of pavement in our streets the last couple of years. The flip side of that, however, of that expense and all of that, is because it's an arterial, there may be other opportunities that are available for Calimesa Boulevard under the economic development, which again is something we're talking about, right? That could be used for rehab and beautification. So there may be opportunities to fund Calimesa Boulevard that might not be able to use on other streets in the city. But again, this would only cover the portion between County Line and Sandalwood. And the more you add to that, the more the cost would be. And I think that given the fact that the Calimesa Boulevard between County Line and Sandalwood is kind of our downtown, I think that's where those monies would have to be used. You couldn't use it south of Sandalwood, for example. So next question, in response to one of the reels on our last episode, which talked about how police, fire, and public works together on public safety, we got this question. What about the homeless issue close all through Calimesa Boulevard by the Staters and little by little coming into the community? I'm reading that verbatim. Let's start with a little perspective. Compared to many cities across Southern California and even nearby neighboring communities, Calimesa's homeless situation is actually quite limited. We're fortunate that we don't have the same large encampments or systemic challenges you might see in other areas. But that doesn't mean we ignore it. It means that our scale allows us to address individual situations quickly and personally. Often, what's being seen near commercial areas like Stater Brothers involves one or two individuals, not a growing population or encampment. And the city does actively respond when these situations come up. Our sheriff's contract includes a dedicated problem-oriented policing officer, or POP officer, and this is on top of that 24/7 deputy we always hear about. We always hear about how we only have one deputy. And this position, though, is on top of that. So that's not necessarily true that we only have one deputy. We actually have an additional deputy that is our POP officer. And he handles exactly these kinds of community issues. The POP officer works closely with outreach teams and local service providers to connect people in need with housing, medical care, or mental health services when possible. So the goal isn't just enforcement, it's resolution and compassion. And at the same time, when behavior or activity crosses into trespassing or vandalism or public safety concerns, our officers address it appropriately and promptly. It's also important to understand that homelessness isn't just a Calimesa issue, it's a statewide challenge. And even though it feels close to home when we see someone struggling in a visible area, the causes, from housing costs to addiction to mental health gaps, are much bigger than any one city. So what makes Calimesa unique is that we can stay ahead of it. We know our community, our deputies are proactive, and our residents care enough to notice and reach out early before something grows into a larger problem. So yes, we've seen a few individuals around Calimesa Boulevard, and our team is aware and addressing it. But it's also important not to assume that we're facing a growing homeless issue where a small community and small numbers stand out. If you ever see something that concerns you, don't hesitate to let us know. If it's an emergency situation, like an active crime in process, please call 911. Otherwise, you can call the Sheriff's Department's non-emergency dispatch line at 1-800-950-2444. But also remember, behind every situation like this, there's usually a person in need, not just a problem to remove. And that balance of care and accountability is what makes Calimesa the kind of community we're all proud to call home. So our final question that I got is, when will County Line Road get paved? And so this is in response to our Stay Informed reel. So this person got the message, right? I appreciate when people reach out to ask us to these type of questions rather than running to social media groups and asking, to which they get know-it-all answers from know-nothings, essentially. And that's what we see a lot of. So as we reported previously, the final pavement of County Line Road is included in the next round of the City of Yucaipa's pavement management program, and paving work will begin next week and should wrap up in a couple of weeks thereafter. It's finally coming to an end. To me, it's not a cause for celebration. We just need to get it done and move on, because there is no room for bragging when it comes to this project, plain and simple. Now, I will add a bit of a caveat. You will see additional work on County Line Road after this. So as I talked about in our big County Line Road update on episode 47, there are still 2 projects left. A water rehab project by San Gregorio Pass Agency from 4th Street to Bryant, and a storm drain project from just west of 5th Street to Calimesa Boulevard. And by the way, I actually went to the groundbreaking for part of that project. So the main part of that water line project is a new basin for water recharge, and that pipeline will bring water from the State Water Project line in Bryant down to a basin on 4th Street. And so you will see that some of the pavement from 5th Street to Calimesa Boulevard won't initially be done because of that storm drain project, but it will be completely rehabbed when the storm drain is put in. For the Pass Agency water line, they will be cutting into the new pavement, but will be required to rehab rehab their section so that it does not shorten the life of the new pavement. Okay. Now, let's move on to our main topic of the day, economic development. So when people talk about attracting retail to a city, what do they really mean? And how much does the city actually control on that? So, as city manager in a small city, one of the things that I do is economic development. And I'm really starting to engage our entire leadership team at the city to start thinking in those terms. But by and large, I am the one that is driving that bus right now when it comes to that. And in that vein, I recently attended the ICSC at Western Conference in Palm Springs, and I met with commercial brokers and retailers, gaining fresh insights about how they think about site selection. And so we have also partnered with Cosmont Companies for economic development consulting services. They are a leader in California in that field. And I did that partially because, as I explained before, I'm not an economic development expert. And so I want to bring in resources that are going to help me in that endeavor. And they were actually the ones that facilitated those meetings with brokers, which were very, very productive. And so it was time well spent. And I think it's going to be something that's going to help us in the long run. So the themes that we're going to look at today are the changing retail landscape, what cities can and can't do, and how we as a city are positioning ourselves in this current environment. So what is economic development really mean for us? We have to distinguish between retail attraction versus the broader mission of economic development. So retail attraction is something that the consumer-facing part, that's what the public sees, right? But economic development really is about diversifying our tax base, creating jobs, managing infrastructure burdens, and shaping land use in alignment with growth. And so economic development is all about building partnerships. And it's partnerships between the city, who sets the rules and zoning and infrastructure planning, developers who find and build sites, retailers who evaluate the markets and demand, and of course, residents who drive demand through spending. And so the city doesn't pick winners or losers in the market. It creates conditions for success. And so local government's role is to remove barriers, ensure responsible land use, and plan infrastructure to attract investment. And so we don't control consumer behavior. We have to respond to it. So we don't control how the marketplace is shifting. We have to respond to it. And where have we seen that? It's in a very touchy subject, and that is warehouses. So consumer behavior and delivery are reshaping what gets built and where. And there's been a recent tilt back towards bigger boxes. And so I'm going to go into that a little bit. But consumers drive this demand for warehouses. Not that they want to see them, but actually their actions and how they shop and how they obtain their goods in their day-to-day lives is what's driving this demand. That's the number one thing. And so cities aren't going out there and trying to recruit warehouses. We don't have to, we don't want to, frankly. But that is what the market is demanding, because that's what our consumer behaviors are demanding. And I'm guilty of it as well. I order off of Amazon. I order off of the internet all the time. And the numbers really show that. The in-stores grew slowly in the 2010s and 2020s while e-commerce really took off. So between 2012 and 2023, I'm going to show you this graph. Brick and mortar sales only grew about 20%. Inflation during that same period was 32%, which actually means real in-store sales have actually declined. They have not kept up with inflation. And so that's why you haven't seen malls and big shopping centers getting built ad nauseum. Yes, they're still getting built, but they're not getting built at nearly the same rate as they were, maybe 15, 20 years ago. Meanwhile, online sales have grown 558% in that same period. So logistics real estate has absorbed this demand shift. So Prologis estimates occupied U.S. logistics space is up 12% since pre-pandemic, while occupied retail contracted. So what does this mean for land use? It means fewer traditional big retail centers, not zero, but fewer, and more industrial logistics footprints supporting how people actually shop. So what are the exceptions that we're seeing? We'll probably get into this more in a minute, but you're seeing the big box, the Costcos, the Targets, the Walmarts. Those are the main things that are driving retail. You're not seeing shopping malls anymore. Any new indoor malls these days are getting converted into mixed use housing with some shopping options, but not nearly what they once were. So as time goes on, contrary to what members of the public have stated, the original concept for Oak Valley Town Centers at that size is likely not feasible anymore. And it wouldn't have gone bankrupt if it had that much value. We've had members of the public come to city council and say, you need to stick to the plan. It's still a great plan. There's nobody in the actual development or retail industry that is saying the same thing. The site is too big. It cannot be filled with retail. You're going to have to figure out how to do mixed use. Doesn't mean that retail can't be a component of it, but it can't be the whole thing as maybe it once was. A Victorian garden style type of shopping center just isn't in the cards anymore. Even Victoria Gardens was probably a little bit outdated in terms of the model that was going to be built for the future by the time it opened over 20 years ago. And what other people don't understand about Victoria Gardens is that it actually is a mixed-use development. There's housing that was built all around it with that in mind. That was always part of the plan for Victoria Gardens, is high-density housing. High-density housing does exist around Victoria Gardens, in addition to all the retail. Faster promises. So it's not just the amount of online shopping that we're doing. It's also the fact that more and more things are being delivered same day or next day. So that forces inventory to be closer to where you live. And that means more nodes in the network, higher throughput facilities. SCAG and Caltrans both documented the rise of the last mile infrastructure in SoCal to cut delivery times and emissions. So the rule of thumb to explain this is speed costs space. Every hour you remove from delivery time usually adds real estate somewhere. Urban warehouses, micro-fulfillment centers, or cross-dock facilities. Now, what's been happening more recently? CBRE's top 100 leases showed mega big boxes which means over 1 million square feet. Those signings dominated 2024. And in 2025, they expected more tenants upgrading into newer, larger Class A mega warehouse spaces as they reassess inventory strategies 5 years after COVID. So we saw the shift towards smaller and more warehouses, but now we're starting to see the shift back. And so that's why the demand for the big places, which we don't have a single one approved over 1 million square feet in Calimesa, by the way. We do have big ones, but not that big. And so it'll be interesting to see how those develop, if they develop. Because again, they're proposed, some of them are approved, but they haven't been built yet. And that doesn't mean that the developer may come by and say, you know what, the demand for this type of product's not there anymore. We want to go in a different direction. And it may be they may ask for bigger warehouses, or they may ask for another use altogether. Mega warehouses did fall from their 2024 spike, but consolidation into first-generation large facilities still features in the biggest league. So think fewer but larger when they do happen. That's kind of the theme here. So developers are entering a new cycle when it comes to this. Occupiers focusing on efficiency, resiliency, and newer product, pushing demand towards modern large buildings and away from older stock. You know, people are always concerned with the vacancies if you build these facilities. The newer facilities are likely to be occupied from existing older facilities that are west of us. So you may see an increase in the occupancy or in the vacancy rates in those areas, and maybe a lower vacancy rate in areas like ours that may have the newer buildings. Especially like in Beaumont, for example. They've been leading the way in the logistics standpoint of the cities in the past. So the Inland Empire vacancy rate is still around 7.4 to 7.5%, but positive net absorption is returning, which means those numbers are going to come down. And the western part of the Inland Empire is tighter than the eastern. So what that means is the market cooled from the 2021-22 peaks where we're seeing these buildings being built like crazy, but they remain active and bifurcated. So Class A and well-located space still moves. That's the bottom line. There's, large 1 million square foot continues into the mid-2025 in multiple U.S. markets. And this underscores that mega boxes remain a core tool when occupiers consolidate. So there's a lot going on in the logistics world, but how does that all kind of fit together? So there's two tracks that are coexisting. There's the last mile urban facilities. Those stay important to hit the speed targets. But the big thing about those is they do not necessarily generate sales tax. Then you have the mega larger first gen boxes. They're attracting for network consolidation, automation, and labor efficiency, especially along key freight corridors. Guess what we have going right through the middle of our city? A very important freight corridor. That's the reality. It's been there since the 60s, and that's one of the reasons that these uses are attracted to our area. And it's a huge shoving match, right? Because you have the infrastructure that's there for the I-10. Obviously, there's some upgrades that need to be made, but at the same time, you have a lot of natural beauty that people want to retain. And so it's this constant pushing and shoving match. And then at the same time, we demand better roads, we demand more public safety services. Those things can't coexist. If you want to have the services, you're going to have the growth. If you don't want the growth, then you have to live with maybe our roads won't be the greatest. Maybe our infrastructure won't be, at the latest and greatest that it could be. We're trying to get there as best we can to balance that, but it's a hard balance. And if you listen to the podcast, you know why that is. So for us, being positioned, again, on the I-10 with interchanges that are actively being worked on behind the scenes, lets us compete in either format. And so, again, that's the reality of where we sit. Doesn't necessarily mean that people want that, but we have to remember, we have to kind of look at ourselves a little bit and say, look, we are the ones that caused this issue. We are the ones that caused these things to happen in terms of why there's demand for these warehouses. The warehouses are created by market demand. Market demand has been driven by consumers. That's all of us. That's you and I. So I think, one of the things that when I was at ICSC and talking about shifting back to brick and mortar retail that we want to see, the experiences, the stores that we want to see as a city, they emphasize that first they choose a market area. And depending on the business, their market may be bigger or smaller, right? And those are based on demographics and trade area. Then they choose a site within that market based on infrastructure and cost to build. So large national retailers are city neutral. They go where it's easiest and fastest to build. So whether that's Calimesa, Beaumont, Banning, Yucaipa, doesn't matter. They see us as all one and the same. They don't care Calimesa versus Beaumont. If we have the site and we have the infrastructure to support them, they're going to go here. If Beaumont has it, they're going to go to Beaumont. If none of them have it, well, they may wait. They may wait a little bit before they go forward with some type of project. So that's something to remember too. Again, the biggest factor that they relayed to me was infrastructure. We do have one advantage, although you can't see it yet. We're farther along in our interchange design at Cherry Valley Boulevard than any other I-10 interchange in the Pass area. So we have more vacant land available. Most of the major big box retailers want a minimum of 20 acres close to freeway interchanges in their desired market. And so we have demonstrated that we are planning for that future. We're planning an interchange that's going to be hopefully, the design's going to be done in the next few months here, and we'll be able to have construction-ready plans to then go get money to then actually build it. Now, some residents feel we haven't invested enough. They don't see that interchange. Where is that interchange? Why hasn't it been built already? Why wasn't it built years ago to support this growth? And I understand that concept. In an ideal world, in what I would love to see that, I would love to be able to build all of our interchanges, all of our roads up front before a single house gets built, before a single shop gets built. I'd love to see that. But it's expensive. And it's not really visible until it's needed. So infrastructure dollars are hard to come by. So if you just look at Cherry Valley alone, that's $70 million. So if you wanted to do all of that infrastructure ahead of time, you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars. Our general fund budget is only $10 million. You'd have to get 20 years worth of our general fund just to build these interchanges. That's a tremendous amount of money. But everyone's having the same challenge. It's not just Calimesa. Everyone's having that same challenge, not just in California, all over the country. And so that's why state and federal programs are very highly competitive. And we've talked about those on previous episodes. And again, local revenues are limited especially for a small city like ours. And remember, a vast majority of the taxes you pay go to the federal and state governments. We only end up with about 10% of all the taxes you pay. And so we often have to piece projects together through developer contributions, grants, partnerships. And developer contributions, by the way, by law, are not available until after building permits are issued. So despite these challenges, we've made meaningful progress, which takes years of effort behind the scenes, especially compared to neighboring cities that are still in their early planning stages. So Oak Valley Parkway, for example, is probably about 3 or 4 years behind where we are at Cherry Valley. So the message to developers, especially at these critical interchanges, is that we're ready. We're going to be ready to go before these other cities are. You're going to be able to open faster and cheaper than in other cities. Infrastructure investment is an economic development strategy, but for the reasons I mentioned, it is a very big challenge to actually get those dollars to execute on those things. That's the biggest thing. So frequent questions that we get about economic development: why did the city approve another Starbucks? Why can't we get a Trader Joe's? Why doesn't the city go out and do this? A lot of times people say, what are you, the city, putting X there? If we don't own the land, we can't put anything anywhere. We don't make these things up. These come to us from landowners. The thing is if you want to have total control over what happens on a piece of land, your best bet is to buy it. Plain and simple. You buy it. If you want to control it, you buy it. Because you don't want them coming to you and saying, I want you to do this on your land, but you're asking them to do the exact same thing. So we can regulate land use categories, not brand names. So I'm going to bring up a map. Here is our land use map, and I'm going to, if you look at it on the map, areas in different shades of red and pink are the commercial zones, which includes retail. Now, the exception is the pink area within the Summerwind Ranch specific plan, which is business park. So in that area, it's business park. Everywhere else, pink and red is retail. So now the zoning text, which I'm going to scroll, which is scrolling through the screen here, this lays out what is allowed within each of these zones on the map. And it says things like restaurants, general retail, drive-thrus. What you don't see on there is Starbucks or Dollar Tree or Stater Brothers. A P means the use is permitted in that zone, which means it only needs to go through ministerial approvals at the staff level. A C means the use requires a conditional use permit, which is approved by the Planning Commission. And an X means that use is not allowed in that zone. So the market decides which company fills that space. Developer and owners secure tenants based on what's financially viable. Since cities can't legally deny a project just because of which retailer it is, if it fits the zoning. So if, when we have Dollar General, then we had a Dollar Tree. Why are we adding another dollar store? Cities shouldn't allow that. We can't say it's a retail use. Retail uses are allowed. We can't say, well, we don't want that brand here. It doesn't work that way. We can't legally do that. And when cities impose excessive costs or requirements or put moratoriums on certain uses, cities lose out on opportunities. Moratoriums signal to developers and brokers that the city may lean towards being business unfriendly, and it may have a ripple effect and impact things that the cities actually do want. So we can't force a developer to build a specific brand or tenant. We can't force it. We can encourage it. We can facilitate it as much as we can, but we can't force it. And developers then evaluate risk, lease terms, economics, covenants, and demand. And so in those areas, cities usually have very limited leverage. And sometimes residents expect the city to force developers to pay for improvements, so roads, signalization, landscaping, that are beyond what is viable. If the city demands too much, developers may decline to build or may push for less desirable uses. So there's a balancing act here, right? I mean, requiring too little undermines public benefits. Requiring too much kills projects. So developers are usually willing to pay for what is reasonable and, depending on the type of development, for more community benefits beyond what is determined to be their fair share, as long as they know what the requirements are up front. What we're trying to do is that the city, again, sets the general plan, the land use framework, infrastructure planning, and works in partnership, right? We don't micromanage which national brands go where, but we certainly can create an environment that would be more attractive to those ones that everybody wants. See, that's the thing, is that, well, we want this. The cities all around us want that thing too. They're all saying the same thing. We're not having unique conversations here. These are happening in all the different cities. So at the ICSC Western Conference, the retail runway showcases retailers pitching to developers. They're, either new concepts, expanding brands, market trends. So some of the examples of those retailers were, I'm going to bring them up on the screen here, taco stand. It shows here their size, location type, growth markets, additional requirements. There's Crunch Fitness, the size and building standards, parking, types of complementary uses, population requirements. Again, these are the things that they're looking for where they want to locate. Veterinary emergency group, or VEG for pets. It's not listed, but it's likely they want higher income areas because those services tend to be expensive. So they want to make sure people have the income to support that. Fun Box is another one. That's another one for kids. Needs a larger footprint, higher building. They prefer leases, high population requirements, probably too high for our area at this point. Higher median income, we would meet that in the areas, in our new areas. Wolfgang, based on preferred co-tenants, probably a higher end center in a high income areas, my guess is where they want to use. But these examples illustrate that there are many requirements that various potential retailers look for. And you notice that a bunch of people asking for on Facebook is not listed anywhere. So everyone asking for it in their Facebook group saying, I want this, I want that. None of those retailers said anything about that. So that's something interesting to keep in mind. All retailers are represented by commercial brokers. So deals are not made by the city. They are made between retailers via commercial brokers and developers who most likely are also represented by commercial brokers. So the city, this event was intended mostly by private developers and brokers, but the cities benefit from listening in. So we know which brands are going, understanding what demographics they require, anticipate who might fit in our market. And so it encourages cities to build relationships with developers and commercial brokers so that when a new retailer is looking for markets, the city already is on their radar with shovel-ready sites. And they go, oh, this market, yeah, I remember talking with them. And so that gives you an inside track. If they know you already and they can call you, that's a huge advantage. And that's what a lot of this is about. The supply side of matchmaking, right? So cities can compile and promote sites. We can provide incentives, if feasible, obviously, assist with permitting, help reduce friction in deal making. So there's things that we can do to try to facilitate and make things easier. And so that's why we have frequent conversations with all of the landowners in the area of those large swaths of land, and we actually facilitate meetings between them and commercial brokers to try to make things happen. So that is the things that we're actively engaged in. So economic development is not about getting brands. It's about creating conditions that attract quality. So let's think about what we've learned here today. Infrastructure readiness is the biggest selling point, right? So think Cherry Valley Boulevard interchange. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. It's not just the neighborhood streets. It's those big ticket infrastructure items that they're looking at. Zoning and partnerships matter more than wish lists. We can have a wish list a mile long, but the cities next door to us have the same wish list. Consumer behavior has permanently reshaped retail demand. Warehouse space, that's where it's coming from. Our demand, our reliance on online sales, and our increasing usage of it is what's driving this. So what we can do as a city is plan, prepare, and communicate clearly. And if we do that, those are the ones that are most likely to succeed. So our focus is going to be on strategic interchange design. We're going to try to balance. We're going to take a balanced approach to growth, because at the end of the day, we still want to recognize and understand who we want to be as a city, who our residents want us to be as a city. We can work within the realities of the market. We have to understand the realities of the market, but at the end of the day, we still don't want to completely sell out who we are. So we have to take a very balanced approach. And again, it's a thin tightrope sometimes that you have to balance from the demands of residents of what they want. And sometimes those demands are in conflict with one another. But we want to make sure we have long-term readiness for both retail and industrial development, because whether we like it or not, it's here and it's here to stay because of our behavior. What I would like you to do is to engage in this. So whether you're a resident, a stakeholder, an investor, engage with us to support infrastructure investment, understand the complexity behind why we don't have X. If you hear this and you see these conversations happening, please help us out by educating. Send them this episode, send them clips of this episode, and make sure that they understand what actually happens in the city, and help the city promote sites. Help us look good to investors. You can do that for us as well, just as much as we can. So in the coming years, partnership, flexibility, and readiness will distinguish which cities capture retail and mixed-use growth. That still remains. So hopefully that clears up some of the misconceptions and challenges in the realm of economic development. If you have any questions or want further clarification, please reach out to me via DM on the podcast Instagram page at Calimesa Insider, or send me an email at calimesainsider@gmail.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Once again, our next City Council meeting will be this coming Monday, October 20th at 6 p.m. The full agenda packet with all the details can be found at calimesa.gov and clicking on agendas and minutes. You can catch it on YouTube at calimesa.gov/YouTube. So until next time, I'm Will Kolbow. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time. Thank you.